Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Fantasy Premier League Show. I am your host, Gally, and I am joined, as I always am, by the fine dressed man from Chicago with his jackets behind him as the backdrop, which is always great. We're going to start up here as we always do, but before we do, I want to see how you're doing. How's your week going so far, buddy?
It's going okay. We were hit with a little winter storm today, so we escaped the snow for the last week and a half or so, and it was even in the 50s at one point, and now we just got dumped with snow, as is tradition here in Illinois. You have winter, you have full spring, and then you have winter number two, and then you have another full spring, and then you have maybe spring, and then no, it's winter again. So we're still in that first full spring winter mode. So hopefully in the next 2 months it'll get warmer.
Yeah, I got to imagine that that at times can get a little bit annoying, purely for the fact that everyone else around the country is talking about how they're not getting any snow and how everyone's snow is down, and you guys have still seemed to fulfill it in the Midwest. It feels like the Northeast is basically like we haven't gotten any snow. I think I saw somewhere the other day, literally in the area I live in, normally about this time of year, we have anywhere from 40 to 45, 48 inches, something like that. And we've had under 11 inches of snow. Wow. Which is pretty crazy. And I think it's actually going to do some negative impacts on I think flowers are going to bud a little early. Even some plants are going to come early. And it's going to mess with a lot of the farmers up here. Yeah. But I got to be honest, I don't farm anything these days. So, I kind of don't have to worry about it. I got to be real here, people. Why? In an effort of keeping it real as we go into the fantasy show this week, I would like 0 bleeps worth of snow the rest of the way. So, want to remind everyone listening, viewing, watching along about our Liverpool all the time Discord American Scouser fan chat. It's a full Discord channel. We have all different opportunities for folks to chat, whether it's about transfers, the women's side, youth teams, cup games, straight up banter. As we've mentioned before, I'm going to drop the link in the chat. Feel free to join, get involved. And honestly, as I always joke, there's really no excuse at this point to ever watch another Liverpool match alone. Because if you're one of those people that just can't get to a supporters group, go ahead and check out the Discord link and feel free to join. It's a lot of fun. And for those of you that have been on Discord and maybe are worried about kind of the overwhelmingness of it or how automatic and ongoing it is, you can mute channels. You can put yourself on Do Not Disturb. I think Kelly would tell you that my phone has never found a way to do any of that because anytime I forget to change the volume and turn it down at the end of the night, she realizes that Kazi never sleeps. Because somehow the guy moved back to America, lives 2 hours deeper in time than we are now, and still finds a way to update me on all of Europeans' news first thing in the morning. So thank you, Kazi. I appreciate that. But let's jump into it. We're going to go through a lot of these slides that we talk about pretty quickly this week because I want to actually get to some discussions. But first off, as always, our American Scouser Cup. We start with following Pep. Pep had a rebound week with a score of 87, moved up in the standings. So he's got himself, William does, back inside the top 6,500, currently rolling in at 64.98. Guns and Nunez, though, sticking right there, trying to put a little pressure on, see if he can't use his chips and catch William on his way to an American Scouser Cup crown, the first inaugural American Scouser Cup. So, but we know there's really only one trophy and tournament that my co-host is interested in, and that is the one that he sits on top of. Once again, walked into a big double match week and got a bye, playing Kazi, which was great, and has extended his lead at the top, holding tight over Kelly, who is coming on strong with high scores. Took down BJ this week, who's had some really high volumes points. I ran into a buzzsaw in Jamie's side this week. Absolutely great week by Jamie's team. And I think we can see when we look at our sides exactly where I fell on that one. and why I wasn't able to make it up. And we'll talk about some of those moves a little bit later. So, wanted to start the process this week of, well, actually, before we do that, let's look quickly at the standings. Still rolling in fifth place for myself after the loss. No real change there. Kelly's still 9 points back of you, buddy. It's gonna be hard to make that up. Obviously, she'll need to win. I think she has one more head-to-head matchup with you. She'll definitely have to make sure she wins that 6-pointer. And it'll be interesting. She plays like I do, which is probably one of her mistakes sometimes. And she doesn't really look at the mini league when it comes to the chips. I can't lie, man. I might really try to graft her and get her to use all of those things at you and play in those weeks against you. So we'll see how that goes. With her luck, she'll probably get you in the super blank game week coming up later on this season that we're going to talk a little bit more about as we get further into the episode. So anything here jumping out at you? Any surprises for you? Any things you think will probably make a run or a change here as the year goes on?
No, I think everything makes sense to exactly how I see it. Maybe you could be up a couple spots, you just happen to be the highest scorer in the league, but I think the rest of it looks pretty good.
Yeah, it is. It is about where you would expect it. The folks that are asking questions, folks that are making transfers and playing a little bit more and keeping up with the rosters, they're winning matches in head-to-head leagues, and that makes sense. And then, those that might host a podcast with me on Monday, they only show up. Like Paul shows up when he plays Temujin. He puts up a huge number every time he plays Temujin, which is kind of comical to me. And, Temujin's still waiting to see if Cancelo comes off the bench and is really hoping that he finds a way. He was questioning how many points he would get for the assist he had for Bayern on the weekend. And I had to let him know that when the player leaves England, they are no longer part of your side. That red arrow is not that they're highlighted in greatness. So, before we get into talking about this match week and kind of the strategies, I thought maybe it'd be good for us to start actually just looking at kind of the team of the week, just to assess if there's trends or things that we could be doing with our sides. Clearly, City was a big component here with midfielders scoring galore. Nice for Kevin De Bruyne to show back up and be Kevin De Bruyne again the week after I transfer him out of my side. But I did bring in Mahrez, so we'll talk a little bit about that move. And because I went to Mahrez and Saka from De Bruyne and Andreas, I think I actually still had a net positive. Just really should have captained Saka instead of captaining Haaland. But we'll look that a little bit further. Anything here that jumps out at you from a point standpoint, strategy standpoint?
I think looking at this, we definitely expected to see more Arsenal players on this list, given that they had 2 games. And the fact that their defense wasn't able to keep a clean sheet, they didn't score as many goals as they have been scoring, has just really hurt all of their players individually when it comes to fantasy, and it hurt their team in general, right? I mean, now you've got City atop the league. Granted, Arsenal has a game in hand, but that psychologically could play into it. If you are in first place and the team that's right under you comes to your ground and beats you, and then now you're trailing in the league, then psychologically that could have an impact. So it'll be interesting to see how they bounce back as a team, because that's going to be something to look into when we're looking at the double game week the following week after this one. And then Tompkins and Emerson, those are just 2 random names there that probably have not been anywhere near the team of the week this is the whole year. And just Tompkins had a nice fluke goal, and then Emerson, West Ham played well, so that's pretty much all that was there. I think other than that, I think maybe we might start seeing Leicester be more of that mid-table team that we're used to seeing from them, sort of that 8th to 10th place Leicester side, and not the 18th to 20th place Leicester side that we saw in the beginning of the year. And I think Iheanacho playing is huge. And I think Brendan Rodgers has to realize that when he's on the pitch, he creates a lot. Vardy's done. There's a shell of a player that's left there. I mean, he did great things for them while he could, but at this point, you have to just move away from that. Iheanacho should be starting every game, should be playing, and you can really tell that he can change the game when he's on the pitch.
Yeah, I actually really agree with the call and the shout there. I mean, Emerson obviously had a huge day, and those are fluke opportunities. You know, De Gea clearly had a big afternoon as well. And then you just look at Shaw. Shaw just keeps kind of producing with attacking returns, which I think is probably shocking to some, but not to many that have watched kind of the evolution of Luke Shaw, especially under Ten Hag. And I think that you have to pay more and more attention to Manchester United assets, especially coming out of match week 25 when they blank. So I think, you have to question how you navigate the Rashfords and the moving parts. But I do believe that we're going to be seeing a little bit more of a shift in like kind of a shift in a movement at the defense. We've talked about big at the back not really working, but then when we start to look at the transfers in and the transfers out and even our sides, start to really question whether or not big at the back may not work, but the projected numbers are still that the highest volume players that are scoring points and getting the most chances are the Trents, the Reece Jameses, are the Trippiers, the players that cost us a little bit more. So it's going to be interesting to see how that actually plays into it. So before we look at the incoming transfers and the outgoings, I wanted to talk a little bit with you for a few minutes here about your strategies over the coming 4 to 5 weeks and what you're thinking here with the double and blank game weeks alike. So obviously game week 25 is an actual unique example of a match week where we have 4 teams on the blank. You have no matches for Manchester United, Newcastle, Brentford, and Brighton, right? Mm-hmm. So that's 2 weeks from now. And then, of course, you have doubles for Arsenal, Everton, Liverpool, and Wolves. And it's an interesting kind of grouping there because you have Arsenal, who everyone's loaded up on, but are also holding assets that are starting to be question marks, like Ben White and even Martinelli, right? We expect some form of rotation, especially when the Europa League matches start.
Right.
And then on top of it, we have teams like Newcastle and Man United that are Brighton, that are taking up lots of spots in our sides, even some that are still holding on to Brentford and Tony or Mbeumo on a blank. And a blank for a group of players that are scoring lots of points. I mean, most of us have Estupiñán. Many players have Matoma on their side. So how exactly are you kind of thinking through how you're going to prepare for, what will that mean for your transfers this week? And what are your thoughts shifting around match week 25?
Yeah, my initial thoughts coming into this week would be that I'm just going to hold my transfer this week. I feel pretty good about my team going into their fixtures this week, and then having that extra transfer for next week. I am not so worried about the blanks because I only have one United asset, and I have one United asset, and I have Trippier and Almiron, and I feel like I can get away with either sticking those 3 on the bench or rotating one of them out, maybe Almiron, to a playable asset. So I'm not too worried about the double or the blank in 25. I think what is on my mind really is the doubles in 27, because you have Brentford and Brighton with doubles in 27. I feel like those are quietly really good fixtures. Brentford has Everton away and Southampton away. Brighton has Leeds away and Palace at home. And with seeing how Matoma's been scoring, seeing how Tony's been scoring, I think there could be a potential where you see people stock up on maybe 4 assets between the 2 teams for those for that week. Because when you have those four matches, especially Brentford and Southampton and Brighton and Leeds, those will be wide open games. You're going to expect a lot of returns in those games. And with someone like Estupiñán, if you have him, you can expect a clean against Crystal Palace in Brighton's sake. So I think in looking at this team for me, I feel pretty good about the blanks because I don't have assets that I feel like I need to hold on through that week. And then because when we think about it, United and Newcastle both have tough fixtures after the blank anyway. You've got United with Liverpool away, Newcastle with City away. So that's another week where you might not even want to play any of those guys anyway. So then after that, then you see their fixtures soften up a little bit, which will be good to bring them back in. But that's a good 2 weeks where you can kind of you can save some money and possibly either use the transfer to get some of those guys out, or stick them on your bench if you don't have like if you have Shaw, Rashford, and Fernandez, and then Trippier and Almiron and Byrne or Botman, like you're not doing very well going into this week because you're either free hitting or wild carding, because that's 6 guys. That is too many guys to keep without transferring them out. So I think that's the only reason I feel pretty comfortable is because I only have 3 between the 2 teams.
Yeah, so I just want to put one thing out there. I don't know if you saw it today. There was an announcement that there's a serious concern that the Brighton Palace match won't go forward and that they will not double because there is a scheduled rail strike in London that day, which is the reason that match was postponed the first time. So with the supporters not having means to travel from the South Coast to the capital, I'm not sure that so there's a chance that Brighton Palace will actually be rescheduled to a later point of the season, which could greatly change those kind of maturations because now you're only talking about 2 teams.
True.
Where I do agree with you on the Brentford, I get a little nervous. And we can talk a little bit more about Newcastle when we start talking. So we know how that shapes out in game weeks 25 and 27. I did a little bit more research looking into the other 3 big affected weeks that are coming up. And I think it does play into game week 28. In game week 28, there is a very strong chance that there will only be 4 scheduled matches total. So for me, I almost feel like if you are serious about keeping your standings and keeping your points, you have to. It's imperative that you have your free hit available in match with game week 28. And believe it or not, those likely blanks that week are Spurs, Southampton, City, West Ham, Brighton, Man U, Leicester, and Brentford. So these are all teams that people have many, many assets of, and those are just from teams advancing in the FA Cup. And they're all playing lower level oppositions or low Premier League. The only Premier League matchup is Fulham versus Leeds. If Leeds wins, Wolves will blank. If Fulham wins, you add Liverpool to that list as well, blanking in match week 28. And we are really talking about slim pickings without having your wild card available. So one of the good parts there is we'll find that out between February 28th and March 2nd. So you hope there that we're not looking at a lot of extras. Game week 32, it could be anywhere from 0 to 4 matches canceled. There's too many moving parts right now to try to give you scenarios because you're talking about 2 rounds of FA Cup fixtures and then who they draw against. But, if you just think there that you expect, United, Brighton, and City to all advance, just being the top end Premier League sides, right there you're talking about again, and possibly even Spurs, where you're adding in Harry Kane. You're now talking about some of the biggest players in the game not being available for a match week in 32. So it's starting to make me think that we're getting to that point where you really do have to pay attention to 2-3 weeks down the road when you're talking about your transfers. If you plan to field, like you said, a fullish team, you can carry 3 guys on your bench and even 1 starter not playing. I cringe when people say they take a -8 so they can have an active playing keeper and they get 1 point. Or you go, Fraser Foster on us and he gives 4 balls bouncing off his face. He basically made Hugo Lloris look like a young, I don't even know at this point. It made him look like a young Hugo Lloris, actually. He looked like an old Hugo Lloris, just making mistakes all over the place, looking like an idiot. And I guess it just shows it doesn't matter how tall you are, you can still be made to look like, you're 2 inches tall if you're in bad positions. And I just feel like in a lot of ways, we're looking now at, 2 matches in hand for Newcastle and Brighton, possibly 3 matches in hand for Brighton, which would just be a really, really exciting thing for all the assets they have out there. Villa, United, Brentford, Chelsea, Bournemouth, Leeds, Leicester, Liverpool, Forest, West Ham all have matches to make up. But then the big hitters, City, Arsenal, Spurs, Wolves, they don't have any, and then you have the bottom feeders that nobody really should have assets from. Everton, Southampton, Palace, Fulham. If you really have too many of guys on those teams in your side at this point, after 23 weeks, I don't really know what it is that you're watching, because there's too many good assets at all of the other level clubs. And to be totally honest, as we've talked about this, I think I've gone 3 weeks, I think it is now, without having a Liverpool player in my side. It might be 4, which is by far the longest. I can't imagine I'll get through a double game week without bringing in at least 1, if not 2. But let's take a look then. I think we've talked there, had a good little discussion there about kind of, and letting the listeners know what some of those staggered and steps will be. Let's take a look at the transfers in for this week. It is not shocking to me that João Felix sits at the top. One, we all know that he's a big name, and Chelsea has tons and tons of supporters that play this game and are following this league. And then the next 4, little surprised to see Tony and Shaw there with the blank coming the following week. That shows to me that players just don't even look a week in advance, if not 2. Right. Mahrez feels reactionary from the last 2 big weeks, with the 2 match weeks and the big hauls he's had. And again, 160,000 people are making a smart decision and bringing Saka in. He's probably the most informed mid in the entire game at the moment, consistency-wise.
Rashford.
Yeah, and Rashford, of course, but with the game week, and I think everybody already had Rashford. I think Rashford's been on here.
Right.
You're probably right. It probably is Rashford by overall form. But I think if you actually stacked up Saka's points, he's not that far behind Rashford over the last 4 or 5 match weeks. I think he's only had 1 blank during that time. And I think the fact that Saka's on penalties and has a double game week next week probably would still make him my kind of top of my watch list if I was ranking players right now by position. I wanted to get your thoughts, though, before we jump over to the outgoing players and then start looking at our teams and strategies. What is your thought around João Felix? I almost won't lie. I almost brought him in, but I'll wait to have that conversation until when we look at my team. What are your thoughts with João Felix? What have you seen so far in the player? And are you still a little nervous and gun shy of bringing in attacking Chelsea assets purely based on the fact that there's 650 of them for 5 spots?
There may be 650 of them for 5 spots, but I think there's only one that's been possessing the quality that João Felix has been having, and that's João Felix. I think from the moment he's come into the side, he has brought us energy, and he's a kind of player that Chelsea hasn't had in a while. And it's exciting from a Chelsea point of view. Even watching their Champions League match against Dortmund, I know that they didn't score, but the only guy that kept getting chance after chance after chance was João Felix. And I feel like he's always on the end of every single good attacking option that occurs during the game. And I have my transfer screen up on my other screen, and I'm thinking about, if I mentioned earlier how I feel like this is a week where I will just hold on to a transfer, but I can't lie that I haven't put João Felix in for Mitrovic, because I have if I take, with Mitrovic,
We'll get to your team, but I agree, and we're gonna have a similar conversation, because obviously that would be the move I'd be making. I have the money, and I thought it was a no-brainer. But like you, I started crunching numbers and looking at how far I drop every time I take a -4, and really hate the idea of taking a -4 next week and to make 2 moves. And I just don't know that I can get in 2 additional players, or at least even 1 really good player that I want. Because my issue is, if I bring in João Felix, I'm not dropping Harry Kane or Haaland at this point. To me, they're both just feel like they're automatic starters. So now I start getting to, there is no Liverpool mid I feel overly great about bringing in. To move out like a Rashford to a Gakpo doesn't make sense. I'd rather just bench him. If I gave up Martinelli, I'd almost have to bring in Odegaard to get the 2 matches. And I've been toying with trying to, maybe drop Martinelli to a Liverpool mid and see if I couldn't get Nketiah, but that means I'm moving João Felix out. So it's like there's so many moving parts when you have that rule of only 3 on a team.
Yeah.
And I'm already stacked with 3 Arsenal assets because I have Gabriel as well. So I'll be surprised to see if these numbers shake a little bit and shift. But let's then transition to the players out. I think we're going on 3 or 4 consecutive weeks that Almiron has been on this list. He scored the goal again. He's still right there. I think second or third, fourth highest points getter in the entire game. He's been, just a breath of fresh air, and it looks like he's the first name on Eddie Howe's team sheet every week. But he's got the yellow mark. He left the pitch injured. They have the final coming up in 2 weeks for the League Cup, and they haven't won a trophy in, 65, 67 years. And, you got Alan Shearer and folks like that saying, like, I would sign off right now for 18th. Literally, I think he said, I would take 18th and the League Cup. That you can take the Champions League and stick it. Like, it was great. I loved hearing it because it's how players should be, like, real. Out of 17th, obviously, because he doesn't want them relegated.
I was gonna say, yeah.
So can you sticking with Almiron, and I know you'll stick with him because you don't want to waste the transfer. How much further do you go with a player in that price point and that with those skill sets? I mean, the drop off has to come a little bit, right? I mean, Earth has to bring Miguel Almiron back to it.
Yeah, but Earth could rotate for another year before that happens, so I don't necessarily feel like that's I've been sitting on Miggy because I've liked having him enough, and I feel at the price point and what he's produced, it has made sense. If I'm going to move anyone in that price point, it would be Andreas before Almiron. And I feel like, given I know he has the yellow caution, but I think they've moved him up to 75% chance playing now because it was just a minor little wrist injury. And so I think given the price point, like you said, I think he's the 6th. I just counted the 6th highest scorer in the entire game. And for someone who could potentially just sit on the bench during the blank, I don't think there needs to be that much movement. But again, so like we always see with these top transfers, whether they're in, whether they're out, it's all reactionary based on what we just saw. Unless you're talking about someone like Cancelo, who's someone I guess they just haven't seen the news yet, and then saw him in a Bayern kit during the Champions League and went, oh, when did this happen? And then now they're trying to move off of him because they don't realize what's going on. But then you can put Martinelli in sort of the same bracket as Almiron. I know Martinelli hasn't scored as much as Almiron, but he has been a really good player at his price tag for a good amount of the season. I think, but ever since Trossard came in, it's not even because of Trossard, but just the idea that guy is there. I feel like that's just kind of affected Martinelli a little bit because we don't see him as connected with the play as he used to be. And I think part of that could be just thinking to himself, like, someone's over my shoulder. Like, maybe the manager doesn't have that much faith in me anymore, and he just doesn't produce as well as he has been. I might be just overthinking everything, but that's one of the things I think is because he hasn't scored in a while. Everyone's trying to get off of him now and maybe moving on to another similar priced asset.
I'm not surprised to see Mitrovic. He's had a few blanks, hasn't really been firing. And Fulham, if you want to talk about coming down to earth, Fulham just seems like they're just kind of settling into the team they probably should have been all along. They'll probably finish somewhere between 10th and 12th. Which right about where, I think we predicted them at the beginning of the year. So the Mitrovic one with another, flag for an injury possibility, Cancelo on his way out. What are your thoughts around Odegaard? And, again, similar to Martinelli, do you think this is a little bit of fear of rotation? Where do you think this is actually coming from?
Could be a little fear of rotation. Could also be because we also saw that Saka was one of the most transferred in this week too. And I think whenever we see players from one team being transferred out a lot and another player from the same team being transferred in a lot, I think part of that is just moving your pieces in between those players on that team. Because if a team is really out of form, we won't see players being big transfers out and then having another player from the same team being transferred in, kind of like Liverpool earlier in the year. When they were in really bad form, it's not like we saw everyone take Salah out to bring on someone else. It was just Salah was taken out, Trent was being taken out, Darwin was being taken out, and no one wanted to touch them because you didn't see any transfers in. So I think this is just a case that if you still don't have Saka, but you are sitting on Martinelli and or Odegaard, you'd much rather have the extra 2 million put into Saka than having those two guys.
Yeah, I'm not going to move Martinelli out this week. I'm not going to spend the money. I kind of have this gut feeling that because they lost, that Arteta may run his first 11 right back out there, but maybe just institute Ben White. It could be Trossard's first shot at a start. It really could. It could be an opportunity for Jorginho to get a start. They both have to be in line at this point. But it's not like Trossard's walked on the pitch and set the world ablaze.
No.
He hasn't looked great either. I don't think Martinelli, his underlying numbers are still there, and he's still making runs. He's in the right places. He was unlucky not to score on the volley that he had against City in the beginning of the first half. So I really believe that there's still a really good chance that he rebounds. So, but I will say, I think he's the one that if I move off an Arsenal asset to make room for another Arsenal asset, it would definitely be him, not Gabriel or Saka at this point. I'm a little shocked at Odegaard because I still feel like he's pulling all the strings for this side at this point, and that at any moment he could pop up. He's on some set piece duties, so you have those opportunities for points there. So let's jump off these moves. Let's take a look at how your side fared last week and talk a little bit about what your thoughts are. So what were your two transfers last week that you took the -4 for?
So I took out Bruno Fernandes and I took out Darwin and I transferred in Mahrez and Kane. And so with the -4, it was a net gain of 4. After it would have been 8 if it wasn't an illegal move. So it was a net gain of 4. So all in all, I mean, it paid off obviously because I had scored more points than I would have. And I don't want to sit here and think, oh, I should have kept Darwin instead of Kane, because that wasn't the right move. It was based on form, based on what was going on. I don't regret taking Kane in for Darwin. I think long term that's the better move anyway. There might be a situation where maybe in the double for Liverpool, Darwin would be an interesting shout, just because he's probably, besides Mo, he's probably the most nailed on for minutes in that forward three. I know with Jota coming back, he's still going to be eased in a little bit. I don't see Jota getting more than 60 minutes in a game right now. Diaz obviously is still a little bit a ways, and then you've got Gakpo, who him, Nunez, and Salah will be playing together, so not necessarily taking each other's minutes away. So those were my two moves, and I felt pretty good about them. Obviously, looking at the screen, I could have played Andres Pereira instead of Mitrovic, but it's one of those things where I'm always going to choose the striker in Mitro over the mid in Andreas in that kind of situation. And you have to sometimes look at your team and go, I made the right moves. It just didn't pay off. Players, they just didn't score the points. And I think this is maybe the third week in a row where no one has gotten a clean sheet on my back line, which is really difficult. The Ederson move has been the worst move ever. Arsenal hasn't been able to keep a clean. Having two Arsenal assets in my defense isn't great. Obviously, they both had doubles as well, so having 6 total points from 4 games from 2 defenders is not good. And then
that was tough. And I not question, but I think one of the difficulties with the moves and everything, and kind of what you mentioned is I don't think you can question the substitutions and whether it's Andreas or Mitro and what you do next week. I think you just have to, obviously it was painful. The Brentford goal shouldn't have counted, so you should have had a double clean sheet. That would have put 8 points right there, and maybe even bonus points, because you would have got the clean sheet with White. You would have got the clean sheet with Gabriel, and possibly even bonus points with Gabriel. So Martinelli gets subbed off a minute before he picks up 2 more points. Just an absolute pep roulette type style play. And then, of course, you mentioned Ederson. I don't want to pound on you about Ederson. It's really just a tough one. You made a move to get arguably one of the best keepers in the league. The problem is City really doesn't care about keeping clean sheets anymore.
No.
So, I just think that one kind of hurts you. So for this week, let's say you decide to make a move It would probably be Mitrovic to João Felix. That's your thought process there?
Yeah, I mean, I've got $4.5 million to play with, so technically, it's not. There's a lot more money that I could use elsewhere because Mitrovic to João Felix, because João Felix is only 7.6, so you know, 0.7, it kind of and still leaves me with 3.8 left over. So still a lot of money left on the table, but having $4.5 million to play with for 2 transfers next week, I feel like is a more comfortable play than having just 3.8 with 1 transfer. Because depending on how things look, especially with Liverpool, I think this is a big week against Newcastle to see how players are going to feel about Liverpool assets going into the double. Because I know you can say that, oh, they've got a double, so you know you should be able to sit on them. But Palace away and Wolves at home. I mean, Wolves beat them 3-0. Obviously, it was at the Molineux, and that was a different Liverpool team at that point, you could say. But it's not guaranteed that they're going to, you know, Arsenal, we had the double game week and we thought they would score some points, and they also, you know, most of them blanked there. So I think this Newcastle fixture is going to really determine for me, especially is if I do end up maybe wanting to go to Nunez instead of João Felix. So if I do sit on Mitro, sit on this team for another week, see how everything plays out, and then possibly do a Darwin situation rather than Mitrovic, and then maybe switch out Gabriel for a Robbo or a Trent or something like that, just to have maybe a Liverpool defender for that double too. Because I think if they play really well against Newcastle, we can start seeing kind of like Kazi's been saying in our Discord chat. You know, if this team can string together 4 wins, they can on the bounce they can win 10 in a row. And I feel like if they do get into that streak, guys like Robbo and Trent are going to be big players to have again.
I'm a little worried about the first of those 2 matches having rotation because you have the Madrid match midweek, and then you have a midweek match the following week to play the double. So you're
Klopp we're talking about, though.
What's that?
It's Klopp we're talking about.
Yeah, you say that it's Klopp we're talking about, but we have seen some rotation. And who have we seen? We've seen it at left back. We've seen it at right back.
Sure.
I do think Van Dijk will come back in, and I think he'll probably start against Newcastle and not play the whole 90 minutes. That's my gut. Or maybe you'll rest him again and you try to squeak out another one. I feel like this is their most important match of the entire season to date. I think they have to go to Newcastle and find a way to get 3 points, and not only do it in a way that will, you know, propel them up the table and move them back into contention for the Champions League spots, but more importantly, give them, you know, a real springboard to go at Madrid. Because to me, you want to get through this tie, and they have every reason to believe they can advance past Real Madrid. Real Madrid is playing worse and is more injured than Liverpool is right now, which is crazy to say.
Hard to believe, yeah.
But with that, I think that you don't want to go to the Bernabeu needing to win. You got to go there at least a goal up, in my opinion, if not 2. Because we all know what happens when referees show up in Spain and they see those white uniforms and they hear those whistles and they see that crowd, and, you know, Fiorentina Perez is standing in the box, and all of a sudden it's like the entire pitch shifts and the ball's just rolling into the net, and there's yellow cards and penalties, and the whistle is only blowing in one direction. So I think for Liverpool, this is a huge, huge match. You're going to start Trippier against Liverpool. That's your plan?
Yeah. I feel like I just don't have any moves that I want to do defensively that would make sense going into this week or the following week. Because I know I could possibly go off Trippier because of the blank the following week and then not have to worry, because then they have City after that, so I could kind of rest away from Trippier for 2 weeks. But I feel like if Newcastle does score against Liverpool, there's a good chance Trippier is going to be part of that attack, part of that return. So that's kind of off a set piece especially. That's the most worrying thing, being a Liverpool fan, seeing how they defended set pieces. I don't know if I'd want anyone else on that ball besides Trippier, for that kind of set piece. So I think that's the only reason I'd want to keep him, because I think there's a good chance that if he does return, it's going to be on a set piece, and it's going to be one of Newcastle's goals in the game.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. So we'll jump over to my side here. 75 points, then the -4 that I took equal to 71. Um, you know, my moves were actually shifting off of De Bruyne, which, on a double match week, shifting off De Bruyne is always a questionable move. I did shift off De Bruyne. I went to Mahrez. It allowed me to then upgrade and go from Andreas Pereira to Saka. So again, like you played the game, 29 -5 is a 25. If I had played both players, it would have been 21. So I'm still 4 points in the good. What frustrates me about it is if I don't make that move, right, and I just stick to my guns and save my transfers, I would have started Estupiñán over Andreas. So I actually would have had more points there. And it would have almost been a break even, and I'd have the 4 points back, I guess. But I don't feel terrible about it. I was really frustrated that Estupiñán wasn't playing, obviously, because at one point I had Mitrovic as the last player on my bench and Estupiñán playing. And I just was like, he's playing Nottingham. It's Forest. That's why you have a striker like him. If he hits 2 and an assist or 2 and a bonus, I'm going to be furious. If you thought that I was mad when Estupiñán finished with 7, you should have seen me when I thought he scored that fucking goal. Because I was watching the goal rush thing, and I watched him, and then I went, oh my, it's him. And then I heard, oh, it's chalked off for offside. And I was like, I can't believe I'm happy my asset just didn't get a goal taken away. And then they're showing the highlight of them scoring the goal, and I'm like, that was a whipped in cross from the left side. Damn it, he got an assist anyways. Really happy I have him. I actually believe because of the matchups and how the chips fall, I think I'm going to be sitting Trippier this week as my first bench, along with Bailly and Bueno. That's keeping Mitrovic in my side. That's kind of my plan at the moment. But that also was contingent upon the idea that I anticipated moving Mitrovic out this week for a striker that I would want to start. With the idea of maybe rolling that into a double, I may kind of take your advice and start Trippier. I like this side. This is the problem I always have. Like, I don't know where I strengthen a team where I feel like I have 4 of the best 10 midfielders, 2 of the best strikers, and arguably 4 of the best 5 or 6 defenders in the game. Yeah. I feel really good about it, but I also know that there are matches coming that I'm going to have to make some moves. So I really just going to have to think long and hard, tonight and tomorrow around, do I want to make moves? Is my goal to maximize points on the double next week? Or is it just to make sure that I'm, staying as close to a green arrow as possible? I'd like to keep myself, I dropped a good 150,000 spots. Definitely bummed me out. There's no 2 ways around that. But, I'm 21 points like I should, I'm 21 points off the top 100,000, off the top 500,000, which I think at this point, it's probably my goal. To start the season, my goal was to be within the top 10,000 again. Obviously, when you start the way that I did, you're just not going to be able to make up that difference no matter how well you do on your chips or your blanks. If I could get in the top 100,000, I feel like I would be like really, really, setting myself up well for next season. But overall, I can't really see a mandatory move this week. I've toyed with maybe moving off of James because I'm fearful of the rotation and just the way that Potter's setting up right now. He's not playing as advanced. Yet when you watch that second half, he was, the second half of the match last week, he was by far their best player. He had the most touches in the final third. We talked about Felix earlier. João Felix has the most, I think it's 9 shots in 147 minutes on the pitch for Chelsea. And he has more touches in the box than Havertz has in 25 games. It's amazing how bad and how much, and I think that's another part. I think Havertz was abysmal against Dortmund. His touch was poor. The two chances he had, he didn't even come close. And I feel like eventually Felix may start actually playing through the center. And if he's playing really in the false nine, we might even see an even better player. So before we wrap up from a fantasy perspective, because I know you are a fan of the player and his talents, what are your thoughts around João Felix? Not whether he's good or not. You've already shared that you think he's an extremely talented footballer. Do you think that he actually fits this Chelsea side? And do you think, one, Chelsea would be smart, and it doesn't matter what's smart, they'll just print money. Do you think it would be smart to spend another $100 million on an attacking player? And two, do you think it would be smart for his career to pick Chelsea as his next club? Because it looks like he's enjoying his time in London.
Yeah, I think he's really enjoying his time in London because they're able to play a more open attack style kind of football that he likes to play. I mean, playing under Simeone for so long and not really being able to be that creative nine that he wants to be, I think it was drilled into him like, hey, we're not an attacking team. We're gonna sit back. We're gonna make some hard tackles. We're just gonna kick the ball up to you every once in a while. Maybe you'll get a counter or two out of this. And I think that's why he's enjoying playing at Chelsea so much, is because I know it's, there's still some time that they need to gel all together. You have 18 new players that need to all, learn each other's names and understand how they play together. But I think given just the effect that he's had so far, is really a testament to who he is as a player. I feel like he's one of those guys. I know we talked about it. Maybe it was a year or so ago when there was rumblings about Atletico looking to move away from him. They're like, you know what? Why not take a chance on João Felix at Liverpool? Like, he could be sort of the Bobby type where he could drop back and he could create and be that sort of creative false nine.
I would have paid $9.5, and this is not a shot at the young man. I think he's going to be a really good player. I would have paid $9.5 million to loan him for the rest of the year with no buy option before I bought Cody Gakpo.
Yeah.
But I know Liverpool doesn't do that. They don't spend $9.5 million on a player that's a rental, and they wouldn't stump up the $100 million. I don't think for a flair player either. He probably doesn't play enough defense to fit into our system. All the things, right? There's some rumblings in Spain that he orchestrated this move to Chelsea because he knew there was no path that led him direct from Atletico Madrid to Real Madrid. But if he went to Chelsea for 4 months, basically that he might be able to angle and find a way to land at the Bernabeu, which it never made sense why he picked Atletico Madrid. Originally, it was the worst transfer for a talented young player. Before Ten Hag, you'd argue it was almost as bad as what it looked like what Jadon Sancho making the decision to go to United over all the other options that he had.
Yeah.
It just didn't seem like it was going to be a fit. It was too much pressure. They weren't at the right place. Now you're starting to see the good Jadon Sancho with a manager who actually can motivate him and, knows how to make him work and how to, honestly gave him the time to get his head right. And the kid just needed to get his head right. And I think it's a testament. I don't like saying nice things about United, but I think what they're doing right now is a testament of that. When you buy players and they go through bad periods, I mean, there were a lot of United fans that wanted them to cash in and take the money and send Rashford out at the end of Ole's reign and send him to PSG, send him to Barcelona and make a lot of money and go buy other players. And now you're looking at it like you might have the best right and left wing in the Premier League. And then you got this young, Garnacho kid. I mean, they're really churning out and it's all working. So, and you look at a Sabitzer, they loan a player from a quality place like Bayern, he walks right in. And I think this is a testament to the fact that Ten Hag has a clear message and plan in place, and his troops know exactly what they need to do. So with these players, though, the Mudryks, Trossard, João Felix, we've talked a little bit about Felix. Any of the other players that transferred in or you've gotten a glimpse of that have caught your eye, maybe think that they might be someone that you may kind of add to the watch list and bring into your side as the season goes forward?
I think as of right now, I don't know if there's much else to look at. If anything, depending on how Conte views Son moving forward, if Danjuma could get more consistent minutes and Conte has sort of the gusto to sit Son and then say, hey, look, man, like you are not playing well this year. I can't just start you based on prestige anymore. You know, kind of like the effect of Klopp that he has sometimes about this loyalty about playing players that have played well for him in the past and go, hey, you are out of form. We need something else. We're going to go with Danjuma. And so I feel like if he's in that squad, that's someone that I might be interested in just because I feel like he can play really well off of Kane. Because I think Kane's the kind of guy who makes everyone around him better. And I know like right now with Son's struggles, if there is anyone else, maybe Danjuma could be the answer there. But I haven't really looked at anyone else specifically that's transferred in besides João Felix, just because I feel like he's been the brightest spot. And I mean, when you're looking at Chelsea, they've got a lot to go through still for the next few weeks, few months to really get a feel for everyone that's come in. And Mudryk might end up being the best player for the price tag in FPL towards the end of the season. We're just not sure yet. But I think there's no one else that I'm really looking to touch right now.
Yeah, the one player I think that is intriguing to me, and I can't pronounce the guy's name, so I'll just butcher it. But the defender from Monaco that came in, he looks a player, Badashir, or the kid at Chelsea. He's got a low price. He's got a lower price. You know, you save a little money from, you know, the Koulibalys, the Thiagos, the even Reece James. He's definitely a big presence. I actually think he's going to turn out to be one of the best signings of all this window for them, because this is what they do, right? They just buy tons of players, and then the one that you think is like the throwaway is the one that usually kicks in and is like, oh yeah, that's the guy that's actually going to be there next year in their starting 11.
Yeah.
I saw a lot, actually. You know, it'll be interesting to see what happens with Leeds. I thought the second half cameo from the striker they bought from Hoffenheim, Rudy, he looks like a really lively player. He looks really good. I also think quietly, and if Megan, our good friend Megan from the American Scouser team, was listening right now, she'd be jumping into that comments telling us that we could have bought the player for $10 million this window and $5 million over the summer. But I think the João Gomes signing for Wolves could turn out to be, because I mean, he oozed class in his 15 minutes, and the strike he takes for the equalize, or no, for the go-ahead goal when they're down to 10 men was really, really classy. And I think there's players like that you might find a diamond in the rough. I feel like these guys are the guys you're going to be tracking to figure out where they fall for next season. But I think probably the only player that really makes the big impact is Gomez. And is João Felix. I will say the one thing we kind of glossed over when we talked about the Gakpo and the Nunez and the Jotas and the Diaz coming back is Bobby Firmino was fit on the bench. And we all know if Bobby Firmino can play, Jurgen Klopp does just about everything he can to play him. And we love the player, but I mean, the guy could be in a wheelchair and he would think, well, there's a better chance of him getting in the right place. Or actually, it's not even that. There's a much better chance of him not being in the wrong place, like you've seen with Darwin and Gakpo. And I think at times we may see a few less minutes for Darwin, or being a little bit more of that like crazy impact player from the bench. So I think as Jota gets more healthy and Nunez might see his minutes go down a little, so that I'm a little worried about that. You know, if I could get one more great performance out of Gakpo this week against Newcastle with a return, you'd really almost say like his first few matches were okay, and then they were good with no numbers, and then the last few have actually kind of response.
Mm-hmm.
He could be an option for the double game week because he's in a really good price point and he's an easy exchange from a Rashford, and you could go right back to him the next week. So that will be an interesting one there. Any final parting shots as we wrap up here and say goodbye as you prepare for game week 24?
Not much. I mean, I feel like just going back to just a quick comment on your team, I think you can get away with sitting Trippier and playing Estupiñán and having Estupiñán, Gabriel, and oh God, who's your last defender?
Reece James.
And Reece James, yeah. I thought you could get away with that. Lastly, I know this might seem kind of crazy, but possibly James Tarkowski at 4.2 with the double might be a decent defender to keep your eye on, is kind of my last parting gift here.
I do think that we're going to have to pay more attention to Everton defenders. Even just seeing how hard they were to break down for Liverpool at times, and we can all gush. And it was a great counterattacking goal. Nunez's run, picking his head up. I mean, I honestly think he was just sending it into a dangerous spot. I think he thought he was passing to Gakpo, and Mo just ran into it. And clearly Jordan Pickford thought he was passing to Gakpo too, because he was somewhere near the corner flag when Mo shot it. But, we would be remiss to not acknowledge that once again Liverpool gave up a wide open header at the back post, and Tarkowski was 3 inches away from Everton being up 1-0 and us all kind of crying in our beers on Saturday morning, and instead or Monday afternoon, and instead it turned out to be a goal. It was one of those, it was a 6 inches changed everything, and the match was pretty much done at that point. And I think the fact that he has a goal threat on corners and set pieces, the fact that he is clearly the most nailed player, honestly, of anyone at Everton outside of maybe Onana, who's the only player who I really feel is like too good for the club right now. Like, he's actually much better than being in a relegation. He has no business with the class he has and the strength and power in midfield. To be, I joked with guys, no one likes to hear this, but that dude walks across Stanley Park, puts on a red jersey, and walks right into the starting lineup.
Yeah.
At this point at Liverpool. So I think Tarkowski's a solid shout. I had a rule back in the day that I would rather eat nails than have a Sean Dyche player in my fantasy side. And I am going to stay with that for now.
I respect it.
Yeah. I mean, I just don't respect Sean Dyche, I guess. That's probably how that goes. So I guess no better way than an insult to Sean Dyche to wrap up a Fantasy Premier League show. So, as you see on the screen, folks, please check out the YouTube channel. I dropped the link in the comments. Like, share, subscribe to the channel, get all your updates. You'll be able to check us out on our Monday podcast, the Thursday podcast, of course, the Fantasy Show, the rebranded and redone Premier League Fantasy Show, or Premier League Show, will be coming back with Bickler and myself, hopefully starting this Monday night. And will be released probably later in the week, Wednesday or Thursday. And then, of course, we have our morning coffee, 10 a.m. Eastern, 9 Central, Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday with Timuchin and his ranging fans of guests. They rotate. They have great topics. They cover all of football, not just Liverpool. And, of course, we have our shorts and reels that we're trying to put more out there as well. If you would like to get involved, contribute, or become a part of this team, send us a message and let us know. We would love to hear from you, whether it's a short video, a story about how you became an American Scouser, how you fell in love with this club, or maybe you just like the color, watched a movie, or you just love LeBron James apparel. I apologize to everyone for that last comment, but I am Gally, and I like to stir the pot. So we will say good night, good day, and have a great week. I hope all of your transfers work, your players haul, and of course, your captains just smash, unless, well, you're going against me. All right, everyone, have a great week. We'll be back